I hear a bell chiming in the distance. Here I'm downtown Savannah today. It's pretty fun. So this is Jen Bonet, Executive Director, coming to you live from our beautiful suite at 2 East Bryan Street in Johnson Square. And enjoying our beautiful office space that we moved into about 5 weeks before all this happened. We have been running all of our workshops virtually on Tuesdays and Thursdays at lunchtime, so welcome to our Tuesday lunchtime coffee. We are also doing one social event, a happy hour or a coffee. This week is a happy hour and entrepreneurs night on Thursday, where I'm going to interview Eric Reagan of Focus Lab, who's just hit their 10-year milestone in business, so that should be exciting. Today's lunchtime topic is on conflict resolution while remote, and we have a very good friend of the Creative Coast, Jill Cheeks, who's with the Mediation Center here in Savannah, that's going to actually teach the class. And she's been a longtime friend of the Creative Coast since relocating to the area. In fact, she used to run our what do you call it, 1 Million Cups, and was an interim director for a short period of time. So Jill, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'm going to mute everyone who has not muted themselves. So please assist if you can with muting myself.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, so thanks so much everyone for joining us today. As Jen said, my name is Jill Cheeks. So right now I am the Executive Director at the Mediation Center here in Savannah. And I feel pretty well versed in this topic of communication and conflict resolution. I've worked both remote as a consultant for really large organizations such as manufacturing industry for Apple, and then I've gone local, working with a team in a workplace that I go into every day, and then how do we make that world go virtual? And so I've put together a presentation that I'm going to share with you on the screen, and I've come up with just a few things that I think are really important to take into consideration as with the changing landscape. And so anytime that the landscape changes, it always gives us that moment to pause, kind of assess really where we need to take certain parts of our organization. How do we want to better communicate? So I went ahead and put out there, just in case we needed to cover it, well, do we need to change the way we communicate? And so my take is yes. And again, anytime the landscape is changing, our environment is changing, there's certain conditions that are changing, it's going to make us want to reflect on how we're currently doing business and what we need to change. I found a quote that I thought was kind of interesting. It's way back in the 1800s. Where Charles Dickens is writing, and he's saying, well, this electric communication. So actually talking about the wiring of electric messages. And this was about when we were talking about how we wanted to send telegraphs from a ship back to land. And so even way back then, they found a way to communicate. And so we are very well placed in today's environment with all of our tools, both software applications, different types of devices to be able to roll with those times. In this conversation today, it's not so much on the tools that we can use, but looking at our organization and assessing where do we need to make the changes. So benefits of communication, we all know them, but I just kind of want to level set and get us on the same page and looking at this in the same way this morning. And so it's really important, even if we're a solo entrepreneur, working with clients, working with a vendor, working with an outsourced partner, working with a contractor. And it's also important for those of us who are working on teams and figuring out how to have everyone on the same page to really reach our goals. And our goals can maybe be money driven, they can be mission driven, whatever, what our outcomes, our desired outcomes are. But if we're communicating well, we're going to have a better work environment, maybe for ourselves, or for our team. We're going to increase the engagement. By increasing engagement and better clarifying really how we need to be doing work and being specific about those tasks that get done, we're going to be able to increase productivity and efficiency of our team members as well as ourselves, because there's a lot more clarity. And then we're going to be able to reach our goals. Again, money-driven, mission-driven, whatever those outcomes may be that we have. So lots of benefits to communication well. Doing it well. So we have 4 areas that I feel like are really important, and they're ones that I've looked into and recognized the need in my organization. So I thought that they would be good for me to share with others. And so these are the 4 that were critical over these last 8 weeks, and they've been critical at other times in my life. Number 1, coach self and team to use really smart communication. So there, I just wanted to use the acronym that we're all familiar with, SMART. And I'll have a slide on each of these. And this really requires coaching and feedback for ourselves and our team members to make sure that we're doing this, because then we can communicate once or less times than normal about something specifically. Number 2, assign a designated responsible individual. So this is a Steve Jobs thing with Apple, making sure that there's one person accountable. Again, I'll talk more about that. Emphasizing asynchronous communication. Again, I'll talk more about that. And then assessing your culture identity. And so I left that as number 4, because I feel like it's almost where you need to start. So that's where we're going to end with today. So smart communication, again, everyone knows that acronym, the specific, measurable, achievable, or attainable, relevant, and timely. And so this is really about all types of communications. It's my communication to you. It's in our email messages. It's in our text messages. It's in our documentation from our meetings. The more specific we can be about really what we're wanting done, or what we want someone to do, what activity we want accomplished, the more specific that we can make it, the better. You know, I'll have someone emailing me saying, Jill, did you get the document I sent over? And they've sent over 10 emails, right? And it's like, and you have to go back and forth. It's like, pause, give me more information. And so it's that coaching with our team members. And then it's also for us on the outbound when we're working with clients and we're wanting them to do something, just making it specific. I know it's simple, it seems simple, but I find often that we aren't doing this. Measurable, what's the desired outcome or goal? How will we know if we're achieved it? The resources required. Relevance is really big right now. And there's so many organizations or businesses that are trying to figure out how they can share with their clients why they still need to continue to use them, or why or how you've changed to be able to meet their needs in this changing environment. And so all of these smart things are important. I just have found that this relevance is so critical right now. You know, this is what we're using, Zoom. So then in media, you see where Zoom sessions have been bombed, or there's a security concern, the confidentiality. The Mediation Center, we're doing highly confidential sessions every day. And people, so you see the media. So then therefore in your initial communications, you're saying, hey, we have a pro subscription. This is how we're keeping people out. This is how we're keeping it confidential. So you're giving them the information to get everyone on the same page and feel comfortable about it. And this is how you're, you know, staying critical and the vendor of choice, if you will. Timely. A lot of times we're not in the same space, right? So we're not working together. It's not easy to see what people are working on. People aren't as available maybe as they were in the office. And so being timely about in our communication is super important. We might have something that's not due for a week. Well, we need to be telling people when their specific part of that activity is due, not just sharing the week, but breaking it down to a particular day. So being really smart in our communication. The second one I have found is really needed. And the reason I wanted to share it in this, because most of the time we have someone that's responsible for a specific outcome. To use an office example, if there's someone coming in the front door, a client, then who's responsible for making sure that they're taken care of? Well, in some office environments, there's 3 people at the front door and just they are on a rotating basis. Well, when we change to remote, maybe that front door is a phone call that's ringing, right? So someone's calling in with something. So how are you changing your processes? Who's responsible for all of those voicemails? And so really just taking the time to look at all of your processes and break it down and making sure that there's one person that's responsible. The area that's come into play for us is, of course, with invoicing. You know, it's not someone at the door taking the money. How do we send out the invoices? How are we doing that electronically? How are we tracking when someone actually pays? What work does that trigger when? So really just going through all of our processes and making sure that a person knows what they're specifically responsible for, and then how does the next person know that they're moving forward with that. And with this one, this is super important when it comes to conflict resolution, so that there's less pointing of fingers when something fails, when something isn't executed well, that we're really breaking it down for everyone so that they can clearly understand. Maybe it's a process map. Maybe it's just a Google sheet with, 1 through 30 of the rows is the different processes broken down, with column B being the owner. So just using those tools, you can even do a mapping of it, where this was our process in person, and now in column C is our process with remote. And so that's what we've had to do to just make sure that there's clarity of ownership, as well as what triggers what. So asynchronous communication. And so this is looking more at when people are working in their homes or in different locations than they were previously. Sometimes we have to create the space to not know exactly what's going on in someone else's world. And so making sure that we have forms of communication, we're using different types of tools to make sure that they can receive information, but it's not necessarily where they need to work on it right in that moment. So we're using Google Hangouts for that type of information. We have a Slack channel. So we're doing certain things. We put tools in place to make sure that there can be those times when there's the deep state of flow work. Maybe someone's working on a grant and we don't want to distract them. We don't want to interrupt them from that grant. Someone's working on figuring out some code. Well, who's managing the help desk? How can we break up the work and provide time to ensure that people can be super productive with work that requires that state of flow? And then how can we make sure that we're providing them with the right tools to do that? Also having available documents such as agendas, tracking the notes of meetings for people to be able to go back to those for repositories. So really making a distinction between what's our crisis method of communication. A server's gone down, and that sends a special alert, or we make a phone call. versus using some of the other that's not just in time communications. This is super important right now, of course, with people that may have children in their home. So it's a matter of balancing what someone may be dealing with in their home, but then also true productivity can really be gained by giving people time and space to accomplish things. I think there's one more thing, I don't know if I put it in the slide. Also with this and the having somebody that's the person that's responsible for a task is the concept of how are we tracking someone's work, exempt, non-exempt, hourly, salary. I've just been looking at it as people have certain goals for the week, certain outcomes that need to be achieved. And that's what we're basing our productivity on versus counting hours. Each workplace, you know, has your own legal and labor requirements. I find it very helpful and motivating, as well as helps people have a sense of accomplishment when they're really focused on accomplishing a goal. And with that goal, it's very specific about what it's going to look like at the end, but not how it's achieved, and really using this time and space when we're working apart to empower our team members. And that really what drives us into this last area that I had here on your culture. And I think it's imperative that you look at how your culture is in the office and what are the distinctions. If your environment has changed for you in your company, if it has changed, then what do you really want to change about your culture? We always, you know, cared about someone's self-care before. I mean, don't get me wrong, we always did. And at the mediation center specifically is what I'm talking about. And but now in this time and space, we've elevated that to a whole nother level of speaking to our team's self-care. And so how do we want to live and breathe and embody that, and, you know, let each team member know that it's important to us. And so doing a little reflection on that, and either, you know, building it in or having somebody responsible for putting it out there that it's something that we care about, right? Assigning a team member to it. Being fluid and flexible. I think it's important to come up with your boundaries with your team. You know, are there times that, you know, you're not going to answer the phone, and how do you communicate that to people? If someone else is relying on you to do some work, how do you let them know when you can and when you can't? I've heard the word transparency a lot over the last couple of weeks, and I would be curious to know what that means to others. I found a whole new, I guess, I found a whole new freedom, I think is the word for me. I found a whole new freedom with all of this, taking my ability to be transparent to a whole nother level. My personal nature is to be very positive, very optimistic, and balancing that at times with the reality. You know, it's like, wow, this is interesting, Jill. Things aren't good, you know. You know, I need to reframe the way I look at unemployment. I need to reframe a lot of things. You know, the definition for success for the company looks different now. And so how do I be real? And so transparency was a big one for me, and that's why I put it on here. Being honest about the uncertainty. Go there. You know, we work in different teams, and even with working with clients, making it very clear about what we can and can't do, and maybe what some of the limitations are, but what you're doing to look into those. I think it's just refreshing, and that's why I put on the next page is the challenge, which is really, if there's anything in this that I went through, and I went through it pretty quickly because it's more fun for me, I guess, to engage with others about their situations and what they're dealing with. But I would just challenge you, if there's just one thing that made you pause that I put in here, is to really look at that for you or your team, or really even your family, because all of this can be so helpful. And everything that I put in here helps mitigate, helps prevent, and can help resolve conflict. Because anytime that we can be more smart in our communication, ensure that there's expectations of work, and we document those are all indicators for a well-run organization that's communicating well, that they're putting the information out there that their team members or that their clients need to minimize conflict. And when we do a lot of workplace mediation, and all of these are best practices for minimizing conflict in the workplace. I went ahead and put my name and email up here. Again, I know I went through all this really quick, but.
Well, I have a couple of questions and comments, but first on the transparency thing. I mean, I've always kind of been a very transparent person. And I've even when I ran the ATDC in the larger organizations, I shared the budget, with every single staff member, right? And I gave each staff member had a budget, right? Even if it was $1,000, here's your play money to go figure out what you can do to incentivize your program, right? And so, I mean, I've kept that since I've been being here, but I recently did individual calls with most our primary, I'll call them vendors, because everyone's kind of a 1099 contractor to the Creative Coast at the moment, including myself.
Okay.
And literally went over, this is how much money we have in the bank, right? And this is how much money we make on a monthly basis from our two primary sponsors, both of which have assured me that the money's not going anywhere, that we are set for the rest of the year with money from them. So we are okay. You do not need to worry about this. This is not, in fact, if you want more hours, let me know. Bring it, right? So I think that the ability to be radically transparent is interesting. I also think that each person's comfort level or lack of comfort level with what is going on in the world right now is very different, right? And it's because we don't know, we're getting to know everybody's lives better, but we don't know what the rest of their life looks like. We don't know if they have an immunocompromised parent or child or husband, spouse, that they have to be extra cautious right now, because if they get sick, that person gets sick and quite possibly dies, right? Nobody wants to be that person that brings it home and gets somebody
right.
that is immunocompromised sick. So you have to, it's as a leader, you have to say, you need to do what's best for you and your family. I trust that you're going to get X, Y, and Z done, and you're going to do it in the way that you do best. And I understand that you have to do what is best for yourself and your family and your personal situation as far as a safety thing, right? When this all first went down, one of our sponsors, and my primary funder was everyone needs to be in the office. We need to be in the office. We need to show that we're not afraid of this. Well, that was the wrong answer, right? And totally changed direction after that. But so I think, as a leader, we have to be aware, each individual's personal situation is different, and we have to allow them to figure out their path forward, and at what point they feel comfortable coming back out into the world. You know?
I agree. And that's the, on this slide here, the balancing best for organization and best for individuals.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking there. One thing that I did for our team, because the judicial emergency was until the middle of May. And so I was gearing up for everyone back in the office for then. And so I sent an individual email to each team member, which of course we can do because we're less than 15. It's just about 12 of us. And so, and I asked them to share their comfort level with returning to work, you know, from 1 to 10. And so that was enlightening. You know, I didn't tell them they needed to share anymore, but I did get a lot more information back from that, which was helpful, you know, and we had everything from a 1 to a lot of 4s and a lot of 8s, 10 being, you know, comfortable coming. And fortunately, we didn't have any 10s because I think it's good to have some caution there. But yeah, so that was enlightening for me in the way I went about determining where everyone was and maybe how could I help get them closer to an 8 or understanding more about how I was going to need to change the office because and what people are able to achieve, you know, at home because of other conditions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I came in last week and rearranged the office such that instead of having room for 18 people to work in the space, we now have work space for 7 people plus the 2 conference rooms. There's one other person in the office with me right now. I do have my mask for when I go hit the elevator or walk through to the restroom or something. To really try to be really conscious about how we reopen, when we reopen. We haven't made final decisions yet. The board meets on the 18th. One of the other things that I think that you talked a little bit about is I think there's a lot of overwhelm around tools.
Yes.
And what you use different tools for, because you mentioned Zoom with customers, you mentioned Hangouts with staff and Slack with staff. And so like, how do you I'm struggling with when do I use Teams, when do I use Slack, when do I text somebody, when do I email somebody? And it's just like, I feel like I've got so many different communication protocols right now. It's like, you know, have you come up with any kind of standard rule of thumbs about how you're managing the various channels and tools? It's almost like there's too many.
Yeah, well, and thanks for the question because we started Slack and then we stopped, and so at the beginning stages, we looked at a number of options. And so now we've narrowed it down to Zoom whenever we're putting something out to others. So if we need people to register, so we do a couple parenting classes, so we put those out on Zoom. All of our mediations are on Zoom. And most of that is because it's worked really well for us. And all the staff members got trained quickly on, you know, scheduling everything and being able to use it. And we do a lot of breakout rooms for our mediations. And so everyone just learned that, and that's all we're using. We use Gmail or Google Suite for all of our more inner office, Gmail, calendar, etc. And so when we create those calendar invites for internal meetings, you know, it just automatically pops up with the Google meeting. And so everyone, we just set the protocol. You call in on that number, or you know, you join that Google meeting. So that made it simple so really for internal stuff, we're using that. For external stuff, we're using Zoom. And then what we're doing for document tracking of meetings, so that there's that agenda that we just create an agenda for our weekly meeting. And then while we're having the meeting, that screen is shared. And so we're documenting into that agenda all of our items, and then it's just a running document.
Cool. Yeah.
So just it's all there for that particular meeting. And then each department has their own document like that. So really right now we've focused in on using Zoom for external, and are just continuing to use our Google Suite for inter-office communication. I've asked everyone to cut down on the emails and go ahead and put it in an agenda for a meeting gathering, because there's not a lot. And then if it's not that, it's critical, and just pick up the phone and call me during those hours that we have on call hours, because it's something that needs to move forward.
Yeah, I think I've got two different organizations that I'm communicating with, and one of the organizations obviously is the membership as well of the Creative Coast. So I probably haven't done as good a job as I could have with the membership. I think our contract employees and I have done a good job of, we get on just a quick call for 10 minutes every Monday morning. Say, okay, what do we got this week, and who's doing what events are coming?
Right.
And it's like a stand-up meeting for the whole week. But then I have to get better now as I start looking towards reopening the space in the not too distant future. How do we communicate all of these new protocols that we're going to have with our members?
Right. So do you foresee it being mandatory for masks to be worn in the space?
So if it's mandatory, I probably have to buy them, and that's challenging at the moment. So I do have a source where I can find them. So I do think, I've set it up such that there's 7 workstations. All the 7 workstations are 6 to 8 feet from all the other places and entrances and exits. We have 2 doors, so we'll make one an entrance and one an exit. And then I bought a case of Lysol wipes before any of this happened. So I have Lysol wipes. I won the lottery. So I think, our policy will be wipe down the desk when you get here, wipe down the desk when you leave. Mm-hmm. If you want to wear a desk while you're at your desk, that's fine. But, as long as you're 6 feet apart, it's more like when you go to the restroom or when you go past somebody, wear a mask. And then I think the other thing is I'm in the process of setting up a new software to manage the space that will allow people to go online and see if there's a desk available before they even come into town. So if you live in the islands, you don't have to drive here. In fact, you should reserve the desk before you come here, because otherwise there may not be a desk available for you.
Right.
And we'll also limit the number of times a person can come in a month, such that everyone has a chance to come. So you pre-register. There's no one person that has a guaranteed desk every day, I guess, except for me.
I like it.
I'm not going to come every day either.
So going back to your comment about ATDC and, sharing the budgets.
Yeah.
And so a point with that I like is that it made me think about using this time really helps us empower individuals, and by providing more data and more just focusing in on the goals, less meetings to help them have that time to put it together. It's one thing I'm really, really enjoying about this time, and me even being less accessible, right? Because I do believe in each of those individuals to do that work, and just not being in an office where they can come to me and, chat about something.
Yeah. So Ashley had a question. She said the $1 million question for her is, I'm sure all of this, when do we go back? Do we ever go back to our face-to-face networking in face-to-face environments? So my theory is yes. My theory is it will be staged. I think I almost jokingly said, like, who's your quarantine buddy? Right? I think we're going to open to small groups of people that we are comfortable with, that they are following safe protocols when they're out and doing the right things, and you'll start maybe hanging with somebody despite, past your immediate family circle. You'll start expanding that slowly. I've also read a lot of information on Hong Kong and SARS. So, right, remember SARS was a big deal and shut Hong Kong down probably 2007 timeframe. 2008 never hit us, but there was all this talk and all these pictures of people in China wearing masks. And so there's been a lot of documentation, and New York Magazine had a really good article about what happened as they came out of the SARS pandemic in Hong Kong and how the city opened. He's like, the author was like, at first when you saw people in masks, you were like, oh my God, people are wearing masks. Why is that? It's like, then you get to the phase where you're like, oh my God, they don't have a mask on. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, people took their masks on. Maybe I could take mine off too. And it's like this whole cycle. So, I miss the face-to-face stuff. I don't miss every day, but I do miss, the networking and the happy hours and all that sort of stuff. So I am hopeful that we'll get back to some modicum of normalcy at some point in the future, but I don't think it's going to happen real fast. I think it's going to take a while, and people are going to be cautious at first, and how cautious somebody is goes, it has to do with their own personal situation too.
Definitely their comfort level. Ashley, is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Sure, I can share. So just to give you a quick background, I do business development for Members First Credit Union. So one of my main things is obviously a lot of face-to-face, which is why I brought up the $1 million question that we all want to, get back to, to doing our normal face-to-face with everyone. But one of the main things that I do is I serve companies around the area. So I go into their companies to serve their employees financially. So obviously all of that has stopped. So for communication, I've been emailing them and offering Zoom meetings one-on-one with their employees. So that's one thing that I've offered. And then I've also put together little items that we have, some of our swag items, and drop those off out front of some of my companies, and just to remind the employees that we're still here for you. We can still help you virtually, financially. So it's a struggle, people aren't used to working this way, and us networkers, we're used to going out and talking with people and networking. So I think this way of communication probably comes a little bit more natural to us. But some of the people that we serve, within the companies and in the communities, they may not be comfortable with this sort of communication. So it's definitely a challenge, and just, making it work for everybody. So that's pretty much what I've been trying to do during this time.
Yeah, I think it's hard. And then the other barrier for some people is the technology is scary, which I think once they get a little bit used to it, it's not that difficult. But for some people, I know it's been a real barrier. Anyone else have questions or thoughts that they would like to share? We will open it up.
Jen, thanks to you and the Creative Coast for doing these lunchtime topics. This is fabulous.
Yes, I'm trying to think. We're doing one on customer discovery. How do you do customer discovery? So if you have an idea and you're trying to figure out if there's a market for your idea, how do you do customer discovery when you can't actually go out and meet people? That's Thursday's topic. So, and then we have a whole backlog. If you go to the website, thecreativecoast.org, and go under the resources tab, there's an online learning link, and I put all of these videos that we record up on the online learning, usually the same day. So there's classes on Shopify and Etsy and building a mobile app without writing any code and launching a WordPress blog and all sorts of fun stuff out there for those who are interested. And then we did just launch a talent network yesterday. So if you go to under the resources tab now, there's a new job board and talent network, 2 different links. The talent network is meant for freelance talent, creative technology talent. So if you're a graphic designer, a coder, a content generator, social media expert, and you want to let people know that you are available for hire, that's a good place to go start putting it. I want to help people connect to folks that are hiring, either full-time or just freelance.
Yeah, I checked that out last night. It's a really nice, intuitive little layout. It's really easy to use. Nice.
Yeah. So if there's no other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and halt the recording.